Hello, this is Shut Up and Take My Money episode 21. We're all about crowdfunding and independent projects, and today we'll take a look at gaming series that could be revived via Kickstarter and similar sites. We've picked a handful of promising titles whose successors might very well turn up on Kickstarter in the near future because A, there's a fan base, and B, the general history of the title would allow for it. But first we'll take a look at recent campaigns and independent projects. And at the end of the show we'll tell you how to zombie-proof yourself via Kickstarter. The team behind Son of Nor is practically scattered all over the world. Still, they managed to get a prototype up and running that looks pretty fun so far. The general idea behind Son of Nor is to combine different powers to battle lizard enemies in a desert world. As a defender of the last refuge of mankind, who didn't do so well in a previous war against the lizards, we are blessed by a goddess called Nor with the powers of telekinesis and terraforming, meaning we can levitate rocks, sticks or melons and also play around with the sandy part of the environment. In addition to this, we can unlock control over fire, air and something simply called essence by solving puzzles in ancient temples. The equal mixture of puzzle solving and combat is supposed to last about 8 hours, but with replay value due to different possible playstyles and a multiplayer option which opens up new areas via combining different powers. For $20 the game can be yours and it looks like it's going to get funded, and there's also a PayPal option.
You will find long-forgotten temples where ancient secrets are protected by cleverly designed puzzles.
Stone Hearth may sound a little like an upcoming Blizzard game and it may look slightly like Minecraft, but it is essentially a strategy game with a focus on town building. In a procedurally generated world, we have to guide a little team of settlers through the steps of creating a new civilization, and each of the little super deformed guys levels up and can learn new professions. Each new world will also get a smattering of monsters in so-called modules, which are basically groups of monsters with an agenda. Since the game is supposed to be highly moddable, these modules can incorporate lots of player-generated content. The simple yet neat concept and the cute art style have already convinced a lot of backers, and with about 3 weeks to go, the game is already funded, but a long list of stretch goals awaits additional funding. We usually only cover the gaming categories of crowdfunding with a few ventures into film or comics, but some sites offer various campaigns not centered on a product, but on a humanitarian goal. Which is why Detective Comics started We Can Be Heroes on Indiegogo. The general idea was to raise money to fight the hunger crisis in southern Africa, and to get fans to donate by offering signed editions, variant covers and subscriptions. Besides comics, there are also VIP passes for conventions and signed editions of Batman Arkham City on offer. And for $15,000, a single backer secured a private screening of Man of Steel for them and 100 friends before it is officially released. Sadly, the perks are only available in the US, but the campaign shows that crowdfunding can go further than just creating a new piece of entertainment. More than $130,000 have been contributed by fans, and a few days are still left. Ludum Dare, or rather Ludum Dare, which means to give a game in Latin, is a contest for video game developers. After announcing a theme, all the contestants have 48 hours to create a complete game with all code written within the given time frame. Since 2002 there have been 48 competitions, and the latest one had the theme Minimalism. More than 2,000 submissions are now up for voting, and you can participate and try to find your favorite among those masses. One of the tiny games that caught our eye is called Perfect Crime, and gives us the seemingly simple task of dragging a corpse to a specific spot, which somehow lets us get away with murder. But since the simplified little body tends to split and get smeared all over the place, the game is a little harder than you might think at first, and actually quite fun. You can find this game and all the other submissions on the Ludum Dare site, and many of them are even playable in your browser. Silicon Knights, the studio behind the legendary GameCube horror classic Eternal Darkness, may consist of less than 5 people nowadays, but thanks to Kickstarter we might still get a sequel. This week the campaign for Shadow of the Eternals will start, and Dennis Dyack, co-founder of Silicon Knights, has already presented the game under the label of Precursor Games. The story of Shadow of the Eternals will span 2,500 years and send us to different places, as a detective in the modern-day US or as a maid trying to catch serial killer Elizabeth Bathory. The goal of the campaign will be $1.5 million, which is pretty steep, but we have to admit that the first glimpses of gameplay look pretty promising. The game is supposed to be released on PC and Wii U, but we'll have to wait and see what stretch goals might open up new platforms. All of this makes Shadow of the Eternals an ideal starting point for today's main topic. Since Kickstarter started to really attract huge crowds, many fans of old and classic game series hope for sequels to their favorite franchises which, until today, didn't get greenlit by big publishers. More than a year ago, fans put a lot of wishes on their list for the Kickstarter Center. A new Wing Commander, Ultima, Battle Isle, Privateer, Planescape Torment, Wasteland or Baldur's Gate. And Kickstarter delivered, although many of these might be successors in spirit only. Other series have even been revived by big studios like Thief or Might and Magic. Unfortunately, we can't hope for a new X-Wing, a Warcraft strategy game or a second Day of the Tentacle. Those franchises lie secure with the big names who have let them collect dust over the last years or decades. And crowdfunding will probably not make enough money to change anything about that. And even a spiritual successor probably won't hold up against claims of plagiarism. Still, there are a lot more wishes on that list. We checked some of the most wanted candidates. Is it possible or even a good idea to create a sequel of any kind? Eternal Darkness is off the list now, but we still have compiled a top 10 of games that we would like to see sequels of via crowdfunding. Number 10. The Westwood Fantasy Classics, Eye of the Beholder, Kyrandia and Lands of Lore. Gaming pioneers from both LucasArts as well as Sierra have already found their way to Kickstarter, but the people behind classics like Legend of Kyrandia, Lands of Lore or Eye of the Beholder haven't made an appearance yet, although both genre and age of the original titles would go well with the Kickstarter crowd. Back in the 90s, Kyrandia was a successful series of adventures with bizarre humor which have aged pretty well and are still very much playable. The Beholder games were classic dungeon crawlers based on the D&D franchise. And even back then, Westwood knew how to capture the spirit of a series without a direct continuation and transferred the same feeling and gameplay into the Lands of Lore games after losing the D&D license. Later on, Westwood was bought by EA, while the last remaining members formed the Petroglyph Studios. Which means right now both Kyrandia and Lands of Lore belong to EA, but a new game with the same spirit could very well be successful on Kickstarter. After all, there can never be enough comic adventures or role-playing games with snarky humor. Number 9. Drakan, Order of the Flame. Drakan has become a kind of legend. The mixture of adventure with action RPG elements and flight simulation, riding a dragon no less, was a revolutionary idea in 1999 and no one ever managed to create something similar. The top-notch graphics and cool protagonist Rin both added to the status as a classic. Unfortunately, the creators at Surreal Studios haven't made any memorable games besides Drakan and nothing at all during the last few years. Also, the studio has been bought by Warner. Former publisher Psygnosis is also gone. An official follow-up is not to be expected, but again, a game in the spirit of Drakan would probably be a success on Kickstarter, and it might actually make its way to a crowdfunding platform, since the designer Alan Patmore now works at Double Fine. So maybe when the Double Fine adventure is finished, there will be a Double Fine Dragon Simulator on Kickstarter. Number 8. Heavy Metal Fact 2. Heavy Metal Fact 2 was another visually stunning game with a tough female protagonist. Julie, based on adult movie star Julie Strain, made a lot of covers back in 2000. But there is more to Fact 2. Quick and innovative gameplay where you could manipulate both hands of the character individually and a lot of creative settings. The studio behind the game, Ritual Entertainment, now belongs to casual game producer Mumbo Jumbo, which pretty much means they're not going to make anything like this in the future. No problem, the game was based on an animation film anyways, and that was based on the Heavy Metal magazine. All three of those had a few things in common: great fantasy worlds, scantily clad women, and huge weapons. The magazine is still being published in the US and has a strong fanbase. Another game version of the contents could easily be made without any connections to Fact 2. Number 7. Descent. Descent was the 3D innovation in the 90s and allowed us completely free movement in all dimensions for the first time, although the many angles in the three-dimensional tunnels caused gaming sickness in a lot of players. The rights lie with Interplay, which could mean a lot of things or nothing at all. Interplay managed to revive the Black Isle trademark and probably got a nice sum from Bethesda for the Fallout franchise after they had been struggling for quite some time. Maybe a Kickstarter campaign for a new Descent could be the basis for a new strong start. But at least there has been a remake of Descent that Interplay released via WiiWare. New virtual reality systems like Oculus Rift could give Descent a real chance at recreating the immersive gameplay. And even if Interplay doesn't pick up on the idea, there's a lot of fans who have been working on similar games, and maybe one of them could make it on Kickstarter. Number 6. Dungeon Master. Practically all the real-time dungeon crawlers of the late 80s and the 90s were based on a single game, Dungeon Master. And Legend of Grimrock recently continued the tradition. The studio, FTL Games, is gone, and some of the designers have even left the gaming industry completely. The situation is similar to Descent. Interplay could revive the franchise, but in the end any modern dungeon crawler is a spiritual sequel to Dungeon Master, and Legend of Grimrock was even called a remake by some. And now Ubisoft has followed the trend by announcing Might and Magic 10. Fans of Dungeon Master can probably look forward to several new releases based on the classic. Number 5. System Shock. For many gamers, Warren Spector's cyberpunk thriller System Shock and its sequel are still among the most important games of the last 20 years. And in a way the series has survived until today. Irrational, the studio behind Part 2, made the Bioshock games, and Warren Spector created Deus Ex. Yet there never was a real System Shock 3, and Spector bides his time at Disney nowadays. But maybe the Kickstarter hype can wake him from his slumber. He could buy the rights to System Shock, which are said to belong to an insurance company and not EA. But even without the original name, we'd take a new fight against a rogue AI in the depths of space anytime. Number 4. Vampire the Masquerade. Vampire the Masquerade Redemption and Bloodlines were two games set in the hugely successful tabletop role-playing universe of the World of Darkness. Unfortunately, Bloodlines was riddled with bugs, which caused many people to overlook the brilliant game underneath. The studio Troika Games had to file for bankruptcy after release of Bloodlines, and the rights now belong to Activision. There is a World of Darkness game in development. CCP is working on an MMO, but the release date won't come for another year at least. That doesn't mean another vampire game may be out of the question. Similar to Shadowrun or The Dark Eye, we could imagine a smaller, new single-player game reminiscent of the first part and financed via Kickstarter. Number 3. Ascendancy. Ascendancy is a legendary 4X game released in 1995. We had to explore the universe with a race of our choice, build an infrastructure and use force or diplomacy to build an interstellar empire. The game was made by The Logic Factory, and even if the studio has produced little since then, it is still around. 2011 they published an iOS version of their classic and still create updates, and they've been thinking and talking about an Ascendancy too. We're practically waiting for a crowdfunding campaign any day now. Number 2. Dungeon Keeper. For many gamers, Dungeon Keeper is still the best game Peter Molyneux ever made, or maybe his last really good game at all. The parody on Dungeon Crawl was a strategy game that had us building a perfect dungeon, tending to the monsters within and trapping shiny heroes to let them get ripped apart by our hideous armies. Dungeon Keeper was copied quite often, but Molyneux hasn't worked on similar ideas since then. EA owns the rights, of course, but Molyneux already finished a successful Kickstarter campaign for Godus and could very well start a new one for a Dungeon Keeper-ish game without actually using the name. The Bards Tale. The Bards Tale is a role-playing classic like Wasteland or Planescape Torment. The rights belong to In Exile, which made a not very successful remake in 2004, and In Exile is the studio of Brian Fargo, who seems to be starting new Kickstarter campaigns every other week, like Wasteland 2 and Torment Tides of Numenera. It would only be logical for Brian to create a new Bards Tale with help from Kickstarter. After all, he claimed that he would keep all his people employed even after finishing his recent new games.
bad luck to be you. The prophecy is never coming true.
And finally, we've dug up a product on Kickstarter that might put the bad anti-shark spray to shame with its silliness. You can fund all kinds of stuff on Kickstarter. New chocolates, pens made out of whiskey barrels and even soaps. More specifically, anti-zombie soap. Supposed to keep you safe from zombie infection for 24 hours and available as lavender, lemon, chocolate and peppermint. Frankly, after the video and a text without any capital letters rambling on about zombies and soap, I'm not quite convinced, but you never know. And if somehow the campaign will be successful, who knows what's next? Anti-vampire deodorant, werewolf bee-gun shampoo and ghost-repelling hand lotion might be the next big thing. That's it. Thanks for watching and let us know your thoughts in the comments section. By the way, you can also crowdfund this show by sending in decorations or other stuff like artworks for our intro. Thanks again and see you next time.
Because I'm in love with you, baby, you know. You are so devilly, 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 and I'm so lovely, lovely.